the city that never sleeps or lets you forget. The incessant hum of the city was my constant companion. New York City, a symphony of sirens, a chorus of car horns, the ever-present rumble of the subway beneath my feet. It was truly a city that never slept, and sadly, neither, it seemed, did my anxieties. My name is Anya. I'm an art historian, a lover of dusty books and faded watercolors. My life was a tapestry of museum visits, quiet evenings in my Brooklyn brownstone, and the occasional gallery opening where the air buzzed with pretense and overpriced wine. At least, that's what it used to be. Lately, the rhythm of the city felt different, off-key. It was as though the city itself was whispering a warning I couldn't quite decipher. The shadows seemed to stretch a little longer, the faces in the crowds a little more suspect. It all started subtly. A misplaced book on my shelf, the faint scent of lavender when I knew I hadn't lit a candle, things not where I left them. I dismissed it as fatigue, the city's relentless pace wearing on my nerves. But the incidents persisted, growing bolder. One morning, I found a single white lily on my doorstep, its delicate beauty marred by a chilling note. "I'm watching you." Fear, cold and sharp, cut through me. I lived alone, my family scattered across continents, my circle of friends small and trusted. I told myself it was a cruel joke, a prank by some bored teenagers. But the unease lingered, a bitter aftertaste in my mouth. I started noticing things, like small discrepancies that set my heart racing. Then I saw, or at least thought I saw, a tall figure in a fedora, always lurking just beyond my vision. The glint of what looked like binoculars in a window across the street. The city, once my sanctuary, now felt like a hunting ground, where I was the prey. My once familiar streets became a labyrinth of paranoia. The crowds I used to navigate with ease now seemed to press in, every face a potential threat. One rainy Tuesday, as I hurried through the streets near Times Square, I saw him, or at least I thought I did. A man, his face half obscured by the brim of his hat, his eyes boring into mine. He looked so familiar, yet I couldn't place him. Panic seized me. I broke into a run, the rhythmic click of my heels echoing against the wet pavement, my breath catching in my throat. The city seemed to spin around me, a dizzying kaleidoscope of lights and shadows. I ducked into a doorway, my heart pounding against my ribs. Was I imagining things? Was the stress of the city finally unraveling my mind? Or was there truly someone out there watching my every move, toying with me like a cat with a mouse? The line between reality and delusion blurred. Sleep offered no respite, my nights tormented by vivid nightmares. The city, once my constant companion, now felt like a cage, its steel and glass reflecting my own fractured image back at me. I needed answers, but where could I turn? The police would dismiss my fears as the ramblings of a stressed-out city dweller. My friends, well-meaning but clueless, would suggest yoga and chamomile tea. I was alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, and the man with the familiar eyes held the key to my sanity. Days blurred. The city's rhythm, once a comfort, now felt like a threat. Every car horn a blast of warning, every siren a scream echoing my own fear. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were haunted by shadowy figures and whispered threats. The man in the fedora always just out of reach. My once beloved brownstone, with its creaky floorboards and exposed brick walls, now felt oppressive. The silence was broken by unsettling noises, the scrape of a loose shutter, the groan of settling pipes, whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. I tried to rationalize it all. Old houses were full of strange noises. New York was a city of whispers, of secrets shared in hushed tones and furtive glances. But my instincts screamed that something was wrong, terribly wrong. Desperate for a distraction, I dove into my work, burying myself in research for an upcoming exhibition on 19th century portraiture. As I sifted through a collection of vintage photographs, one image stopped me cold. It was a portrait of a young woman, her gaze both haunting and familiar. Her eyes, wide and expressive, seemed to lock onto mine across the chasm of time. And then I realized why the image had struck such a nerve. The woman in the photograph was the spitting image of me. The same auburn hair, the same high cheekbones, even the same faint freckle above the lip. It was like looking into a mirror from another era. My breath caught in my throat. Who was this woman and what was her connection to me? The photograph was accompanied by a faded inscription on the back, Eleanor, 1888, Eleanor. The name echoed in my mind. I had to know more. I spent hours poring over genealogical records, scouring online databases, desperate to unearth any link between myself and this mysterious Eleanor. Days turned into sleepless nights, my apartment a whirlwind of research papers and hastily scribbled notes. And then a breakthrough. A faded newspaper clipping dated 1888 told the story of Eleanor van der Linde, a young socialite who had vanished from her Fifth Avenue mansion without a trace. The case had captivated the city, but Eleanor was never found. The article mentioned the van der Linde family's penchant for collecting rare and unusual artifacts, many of which were sold off after Eleanor's disappearance. One particular item caught my eye, an antique silver locket, said to have been Eleanor's prized possession. I had a hunch. I remembered seeing a similar locket on display at a dusty antique shop in the village, a place I often frequented in search of unique pieces for my apartment. I rushed out, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The shop was dimly lit, its air thick with the scent of beeswax and old paper. The proprietor, a stooped old man with knowing eyes, greeted me with a curt nod. "Looking for something in particular, miss?" he rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm looking for a silver locket. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor van der Linde." The old man's eyes narrowed. He disappeared into the back of the shop, emerging moments later with a velvet-lined box. Inside, nestled in faded crimson velvet, lay the locket. It was identical to the one in the photograph, its intricate design tarnished with age. As I reached for it, my fingers brushed against something cold and hard, a small, folded piece of paper tucked beneath the velvet. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten note, the ink faded but still legible. "Don't trust anyone," it read. "They took me. They can take you too." A chill ran down my spine. It was Eleanor's handwriting, I was sure of it. But what did it mean? Who had taken her and why? And what did her disappearance have to do with the strange events happening to me? I looked up at the shopkeeper, his face now unreadable in the dim light. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He simply shook his head, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and fear. "Some secrets," he said, his voice a low growl, "are best left buried." But it was too late. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how hard you tried to outrun it. And as I clutched the locket in my hand, I knew that time was running out, for me and for the truth about Eleanor van der Linde. The antique shop, once a place of fascination, now felt tainted, heavy with unseen eyes. I fled, clutching the locket and note like a lifeline. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. "They took me. They can take you too." Who were they? Back in my apartment, the fear I'd been suppressing slammed into me. The city noises outside my window morphed into whispers, the creaking floorboards into approaching footsteps. I was no longer just an art historian, a lover of museums and old things. I was now connected to a century-old mystery, to a woman who looked uncannily like me, to a danger that felt terrifyingly real. The weight of the locket in my hand was a constant reminder. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't going crazy. Driven by a desperate need to understand, I returned to my research, Eleanor's locket a constant presence on my desk. I scoured old newspapers, police records, even society gossip columns from the late 19th century. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. Eleanor, it turned out, wasn't just a pretty face in a gilded cage. She was a budding photographer, fascinated by the city's underbelly, by the lives of the forgotten and the marginalized. Her disappearance coincided with a series of strange disappearances in the city. All young women, all vanished without a trace. The police at the time suspected a serial abductor, but no one was ever caught. The cases went cold, relegated to the dusty archives of unsolved mysteries. But for me, they were burning with a terrifying immediacy. Days turned into weeks. My obsession with Eleanor's story consumed me. I neglected my work, my friends, my life. I barely slept, haunted by nightmares of shadowy figures and Eleanor's pleading eyes. The line between past and present, between my life and hers, blurred. One evening, as I stood in front of the mirror brushing my hair, I caught my own reflection. But it wasn't just me I saw. It was as if Eleanor was there, staring back at me, her fear palpable across the years. Or was I losing my mind? Was this what it felt like to be haunted, not by a ghost, but by the echoes of a life lived and lost, by the weight of unanswered questions and unspoken fears? Determined to find a connection, I revisited Eleanor's photographs. Most were portraits, but a few captured street scenes, glimpses of New York City as it was over a century ago. One photograph in particular sent shivers down my spine. It was a seemingly innocuous image of a bustling street corner, horse-drawn carriages and pedestrians a blur of motion. But in the background, partially obscured by a lamppost, stood a figure. A tall man in a fedora, his face shrouded in shadow, his eyes fixed on the camera. The man in the photograph, the man I'd seen or thought I'd seen in the crowd. The man who haunted my dreams. He was real, and he had been watching, not just me, but Eleanor too. Panic welled up inside me, choking, suffocating. I was a breath away from becoming untethered, lost in the labyrinth of my own making. I needed to ground myself, to find something tangible, something real. My gaze fell on the antique locket, its silver cool against my skin. As I opened it, a small dried flower fell out. It was a lily, its once vibrant white, now the color of aged parchment. The white lily, the gift on my doorstep. It wasn't just a random act of intimidation, it was a message, a calling card from the past, a link between me and Eleanor, a chilling reminder that history had a way of repeating itself. Despair threatened to engulf me, but a flicker of defiance ignited within. I wouldn't be another victim, another forgotten face in the annals of unsolved mysteries. Eleanor's locket wasn't just a link to the past, it was a key to unraveling the truth. I had to find out who the man in the fedora was, what his connection was to Eleanor, and why he was now fixated on me. But more importantly, I had to understand why Eleanor had written that note, why she had warned me not to trust anyone. The answers I knew lay buried in the past, and I, armed with Eleanor's legacy and my own growing determination, was going to unearth them, even if it meant coming face to face with my own darkest fears. The city, usually a cacophony of noise, seemed to hold its breath as I walked. Each footstep echoed with the weight of the locket in my pocket, a constant reminder of Eleanor's warning. The man in the fedora, the lilies, the note, they were pieces of a puzzle, and I was determined to put them together. My search for answers led me to the New York Public Library, its imposing marble facade a symbol of knowledge and history. Inside, the hushed silence was broken only by the rustle of turning pages and the soft tapping of keyboards. The air smelled of old paper and leather, a scent both comforting and vaguely unsettling. I navigated the labyrinthine halls, my fingers tracing the spines of countless volumes. Each book held a story, a life lived, a secret whispered. Somewhere within these walls, I believed, was the key to unlocking Eleanor's past, and perhaps my own future. I found myself drawn to the genealogy section, a dimly lit corner filled with dusty tomes and microfilm readers. Behind a towering oak desk sat a woman, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes magnified by thick glasses. She looked like she could have stepped out of a Dickens novel. Mustering my courage, I approached her, my voice barely a whisper. "Excuse me," I began. "I'm looking for information on the van der Linde family, specifically Eleanor van der Linde. She disappeared in the late 1800s. The librarian's gaze was sharp, piercing. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, a flicker of recognition crossed her features. "Ah, yes," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for her age. "Eleanor van der Linde, a tragic story." The librarian led me to a secluded alcove, its shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. She pulled out a heavy book, its pages yellowed with age. "This," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is the van der Linde family history. It was donated to the library many years ago, but it's rarely requested. As I opened the book, a musty smell wafted up, the scent of time and forgotten secrets. The pages were filled with elegant script detailing the family's lineage, their accomplishments, their scandals, and then I found her, Eleanor. Her portrait stared back at me, her eyes filled with a haunting familiarity, but it was the inscription beneath her picture that sent a shiver down my spine. Eleanor van der Linde, 1868 to 1888, lost to the shadows. Section 4, the van der Linde legacy. As I delved deeper into the family history, a pattern emerged. The van der Lindes, it seemed, were plagued by tragedy. Accidents, illnesses, untimely deaths. It was as if a curse followed them. And then there were the disappearances. Eleanor wasn't the first van der Linde woman to vanish without a trace. Over the generations, there had been others, all young, all beautiful, all swallowed by the city's shadows. Each disappearance was shrouded in rumors, whispers of foul play, of secrets buried deep. I felt a surge of sympathy for Eleanor. She wasn't just a victim, she was the latest in a long line of women who had met with an unfortunate end. But what was the secret that bound them together? What dark legacy had they inherited? Section 5, a name in the shadows. The librarian, who had been watching me intently, cleared her throat. "There are stories," she said, her voice barely audible, rumors whispered through the years. "They say that the van der Lindes were involved in something dark, something dangerous, something that attracted unwanted attention." She leaned closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and fascination. "They say that it was a secret society, a group of powerful men who dabbled in the occult and forbidden knowledge, and the women, the ones who disappeared, they knew too much." A name jumped out at me from the page, a name whispered in hushed tones, a name that sent a chill down my spine. "The Order of the Crimson Lily," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of dread and excitement. Section 6, Face to Face. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. The man in the fedora, the lilies, the note. They were all connected to the secret society, this Order of the Crimson Lily. But what did they want with me, and what had happened to Eleanor? As if on cue, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could feel someone watching me, a presence so palpable it was almost physical. Slowly, I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. And there he was. The man from the photograph, the man from my dreams, the man who had been following me. He stood in the shadows, his face partially hidden by the brim of his hat, his eyes glinting with a cold, hard light. "Hello, Anya," he said, his voice a low, menacing purr. "We've been expecting you." Terror, sharp and cold, pierced through me. My breath caught in my throat, my pulse hammered against my eardrums. Time seemed to warp, the musty smell of old books, the soft hum of the library lights, the man's words, all suspended in a bubble of dread. He stepped closer, emerging from the shadowy alcove. The fedora hid his features, but his eyes, a piercing blue that seemed to see right through me, held me captive. The air crackled with a strange energy, a palpable tension that made it difficult to breathe. You know my name," I stammered, my voice a mere squeak. He chuckled, a low, humorless sound that echoed through the silent stacks. "We know everything about you, Anya. We've been watching you for a very long time." He spoke with an air of quiet authority, a chilling confidence that sent chills down my spine. My mind raced, desperately searching for an escape, for a rational explanation, for anything but the terrifying reality unfolding before me. "Why?" I managed, my voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? What do you want with me?" He smiled then, a slow, predatory grin that revealed a flash of white teeth. "Eleanor sent us." Eleanor. The name, once a source of comfort, now felt like a brand, searing me with the weight of its implication. "Eleanor, but she's gone," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "Gone, but not forgotten," the man corrected, his voice smooth as silk. He gestured towards a narrow, iron-wrought staircase tucked behind a towering bookshelf. It was a part of the library I'd never seen before, hidden in plain sight. Come, he urged, his tone brooking no argument. There's much you need to see, much you need to understand. Fear warred with curiosity, the pull of the unknown a powerful lure. My legs, though trembling, followed him down the dark, narrow stairs. The air grew colder, the scent of old paper replaced by something musty, earthy. We descended deeper, the library's familiar sounds fading above us, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the echo of our footsteps. The staircase opened into a vast subterranean chamber, its high vaulted ceiling supported by massive stone pillars. Flickering gaslight illuminated the space, casting long dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar draped in crimson velvet. A group of figures, cloaked and hooded, stood around the altar, their faces hidden in shadow. They chanted in low, guttural tones, their voices weaving a tapestry of sound both mesmerizing and terrifying. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of power that made my skin crawl. The man in the fedora led me towards the altar, his grip on my arm like a vice. As we approached, the chanting ceased, replaced by an expectant silence. Brothers and sisters, the man announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, we are gathered here tonight to welcome a descendant of our order, a descendant of Eleanor van der Linde. The hooded figures turned towards me, their gazes like burning coals. Eleanor, one of the figures spoke, his voice raspy with age, was one of us. She sought knowledge, power, immortality, and she found it here, in the Order of the Crimson Lily. He gestured towards the altar, where a silver chalice rested on the crimson velvet. The elixir of life, he explained, his voice a low hiss, passed down through generations from initiate to initiate, and now, Anya, it is your birthright. The reality of the situation slammed into me. I wasn't just caught in a web of historical intrigue. I was at the heart of something ancient, something powerful, something dangerous. And the key to it all, the link between me and Eleanor, was blood. But something felt wrong. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. Don't trust anyone. They took me. If the Order offered immortality, why did she warn me? Why did her eyes, even in death, reflect such fear? I glanced at the man in the fedora, his face still partially obscured. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held a new intensity, a glint of triumph that sent a shiver down my spine. Something was amiss, and I had a sinking feeling that I was about to become a pawn in a game far older and far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The chalice, cold and heavy in my hand, pulsed with an energy that felt both alluring and repellent. The hooded figures watched, their silence thick with anticipation. I glanced at the man in the fedora, his smug smile a confirmation of my growing suspicions. This wasn't a gift, it was a trap. Eleanor hadn't embraced the Order, she'd feared it. Her disappearance wasn't a willing transformation, but a desperate escape. The elixir of life wasn't a miraculous potion, but a tool of control, a way to bind generations to their twisted legacy. I wouldn't be a prisoner in my own lineage. I wouldn't let their obsession with power, with cheating death, consume another generation. I was a New Yorker, and in this city, we fight for our own truths. With a swift movement, I hurled the chalice against the stone altar. The crash echoed through the chamber, the silver cracking, the crimson velvet stained with its spilled contents. The hooded figures gasped, their unified breath a wave of shock and outrage. The man in the fedora lunged, but it was too late. I'd already slipped past him, adrenaline propelling me towards the staircase. Their whispers, their threats faded as I raced back towards the familiar chaos of the library, back towards the city that held both my past and my future. The city that never sleeps had shown me its underbelly, its heart of shadows and secrets. But it had also shown me its resilience, its unwavering pulse of survival. I was no longer just Anya, the art historian, but Anya, the keeper of a legacy, the breaker of a curse.